All right, offshoot from yesterday's conversation about MFA, we're going to talk today in our stand up about Microsoft Entra's changes that they've made to automatically turning on certain policies specific to MFA. So this is an announcement that they made 2 days ago, I think it was November 6th, that they're going to start auto enabling certain policies for their M365 customers, which is a change from what they've done historically and letting you turn them on, having them off by default. Yuri, talk us through a little bit. What do we got going on here?
Yeah, so let's look at the announcement. So I'm just going to pull it up. Microsoft is really committed to one of their principles of secure by default, right? And earlier this year, there were some stats that Microsoft presented that only 28% of their customers were using multi-factor authentication, which is a big deal, right, Brian? And part of that is because in the Microsoft Digital Defense Report that we covered earlier, they mentioned that there were 4,000 identity attacks per second, right? So things like password spray attacks, credential stuffing, phishing attacks, credential theft, password reuse, all these attacks that try and, steal a user's identity. A lot of those attacks are mitigated by multi-factor authentication, right? So when Microsoft says earlier in the year that only 28% of their users have MFA enabled, well, guess what? This is one way of them helping customers by enabling MFA by default, right? And they came out with a statement saying they would enable these three policies. And policy number one is require multi-factor authentication for admin portals. This is really important because if you have multiple admins in your organization, those administrator accounts, they have full privileges to do whatever they want. They could reset passwords, they could create new accounts, they can delete accounts. So this policy is going to cover admin roles when signing into the Microsoft admin portal. The next conditional access policy is requiring multi-factor authentication for per user multi-factor authentication users. And this is going to apply to authentication methods and basically require MFA for all cloud apps that are integrated into your Microsoft 365 tenant. And then the last one is a really good conditional access policy. It's requiring multi-factor authentication for high-risk sign-ins. So again, if Microsoft detects that you have a user account that's signing in from a risky location, maybe atypical travel, or has credentials that are leaked and being spotted in the dark web, they'll request re-authentication for your user account. So I think this is moving the needle quite a bit. And again, we should see those statistics going from 28% to a lot closer to 100% here in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, there were a couple of highlights that I took out of this article. One that I want to call out, and I'm just going to read a little bit of this here. Two slightly different but very related topics. Securing an email or phone number to use multi-factor authentication raised costs for fraudsters enough that synthetic account creation plummeted by 99%. That's significant, right? Like, they're just not even trying. They see MFA, they're like, nope, that's too much work. We're going to go find somebody that doesn't have MFA and mess with their stuff instead. So I thought that was really stuck out to me. The other thing in that same paragraph, it talks about friction later. This is one of the things we talk about a lot, right? Is security policies, new security things often create friction with users who get upset at why is the security team doing this thing? Why are they doing it? They're making my job harder. Like, we hear that a lot. But what Microsoft called out is it says, under the new policy, unaided password recovery jumped to more than 90%, and the policy didn't drive customers away. In fact, multi-factor authentication policy had such a positive effect on integrity, security, and recoverability that customer retention improved by 5%. Or more than 5%. And then it says good security reduces friction. So I think that's another important piece here, is that they're using data to show that from their experience, this kind of thing actually improves the user experience in a way that ultimately makes users happy while at the same time making your business more secure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about, attacker, in my mind, attacker return on investment. If, attackers see that, they've got your username and password, but they can't log in, guess what? They're going to move on to lower hanging fruit and maybe skip your organization. So again, I see MFA as kind of a Hall of Fame control, one of the top 5 that we've talked about, where it adds significant security for a little bit of effort. And in the future, again, we'll talk about kind of return on mitigation as helping you prioritize controls. But I think Microsoft is doing the right thing by enabling these by default for tenants. So one thing you do have to be aware of is, if you are a Microsoft 365 organization, you'll want to log into Azure and look at the conditional access policies. So if Microsoft has not yet deployed these policies, you'll want to take a look. And you might already be using MFA with a third-party provider, let's say Duo, right? That's a big MFA provider. So you'll want to at least be aware that those policies are there and that they're not conflicting with the existing policies you might have. But again, it's worth taking a look at to make sure that that the policies are there. I believe they're going to be in read-only mode for several weeks, so you have time to talk to management about it. And then B, make sure that they're not going to be conflicting and essentially asking you twice for your maybe third-party MFA and then the Microsoft's MFA provider.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see. There were a couple other things that stood out that I wanted to call out here as well. One, they just say right in the article, Microsoft does, our goal is 100% multi-factor authentication. They cite in there a study that was done. Take that for what it's worth, but there's a link to an additional study that says MFA reduces the risk of account takeover by 99%. So I think with that stat in mind and with the relative ease of enabling MFA, it seems like it should be at 100%. Everybody should be doing this.
Yeah, I like to think of MFA as if there was an analogy, kind of like brakes on a car, right? The brakes on a car are what allow the car to go fast, right? If you don't have brakes, you're not going to be speeding. And so similar to, this world where we're working remotely, working from hotel rooms, coffee shops, in the office, outside of the office, I think MFA is really what allows you to have that kind of remote work without the risk of your account being compromised. So that's a really important control to have.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One other thing, Brian, I wanted to call out is, to the point you made about Microsoft potentially rolling out more controls. They also announced that, they will be implementing Azure tenant baseline controls. So 99 controls across 9 security domains by default. So I think Microsoft is, again, going in the right direction by helping customers who might not have a security team. They might not have a security budget. And, they haven't thought about the risks of, having these accounts without any additional protection. So I think, again, this is going to increase the security posture for most organizations, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I think that was the first thing I said to you after I read the article was it says in the article, and I'll read it again, this line. It says, our first 3 policies are multi-factor authentication related. And then they go through the table that you talked about at the beginning. And so I read that as this is the first of many. They're doing this first because Microsoft feels like, based on the studies and other work that they've done, MFA is the most effective single thing you can do to secure your business. So they're doing that first, but I read that as they're going to be doing more things as time goes on where they're auto-enabling security features.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, this was great. And I guess on an ending note, go log into your Azure account. So conditional access policies are controlled from portal.azure.com. That's where you would see these policies deployed. Again, if you're a Microsoft 365 tenant, take a look and see if those new policies have been added to your account in read-only mode, and discuss it with your team and management.
Good deal. Ready break. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks.